For more on the situation in Egypt, I'm joined now by Stephen Fish. He's a comparative political scientist who studies democracy and regime change. He's also a professor at the University of California in Berkeley. He's joining us from California. Now, you study democracies. What do you make of what's going on in Egypt?
Well, this is certainly not a good example of democratization. Things were going reasonably well in Egypt until the military intervened. Of course, the Muslim Brotherhood government, led by President Morsi, was not a model government by any means. It suffered from incompetence in its ranks. It suffered from some corruption and did not treat opposition the way a democratically elected government should. That said, it was a model of liberal restraint and democracy compared to what's been going on since the military coup of early last month.
Now, you've also talked a great deal about Muslim countries lagging behind with democracy. Why is that?
It's very hard to say. I can't find anything about Islam itself that would lead countries to be, or Muslims to be, behind in democracy. I don't think we've really figured out the answer to that question yet. Some people have pointed to the treatment of women. Some people have pointed to just the fact that this kind of accident that so much of the world's oil is located underneath the feet of Muslims themselves, which of course has nothing to do with Islam, but might have something to do with preventing democracy from emerging.
Stephen, it seemed to me that the people took to the streets and they protested and asked for Mubarak's ouster. They got that. They wanted democracy. It seems like democracy's gone off the rails there, and now it looks as though Mubarak may be released. So what do we make out of all of this?
Well, I think the main lesson we take away is military intervention in politics. A military coup is never justified. I had a hard time believing early last month when the military intervened and executed a coup against President Morsi that so many people were relieved by this. In the United States, even many of our leaders seemed to be okay with this. The Obama administration did not endorse the coup by any means, but it took a very soft line. It refused to call it a coup. It refused to cut off military aid. I think that we're now seeing what a mistake that was. I think we're now seeing basically the incitement of civil war by this military that seems to be intent in crushing the Muslim Brotherhood by any means necessary. You cannot have military coup in a democracy. You cannot restore democracy using a military coup. Democracy is restored and maintained at the ballot box, not by the military.
So the genie's out of the bottle. Is there any way to get it back in? I mean, the people yearning for democracy there in Egypt, are they going to see it, or it's just not going to happen?
I'm confident that eventually it still could happen. One of the good things about Egypt is that the public is so politicized, that people really care about self-government. They're out in the street. This is not an indifferent public. Egyptians care. They're engaged in politics. Right now, unfortunately, though, society is very polarized. You had a Muslim Brotherhood government that was not terribly repressive, but that governed rather incompetently. And in some ways without the tolerance that a democratically elected government should display. And then you have a military on the other side that's very aggrieved and that clearly is willing to do just about anything to wipe out the Muslim Brotherhood. This is not a prescription for peace and democracy in the short run. That said, over the next several years, going into the next decade or so, there's no reason why self-government cannot emerge in Egypt. Many democracies have emerged out of deadlocks between two antagonistic forces rather than out of peace and conciliation. That can come later.
Stephen Fish, thank you so much for joining us. Certainly appreciate your analysis.